Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon is like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. I used to be one of those people who didn't really see the point in doing a marathon, running that far, just sounded like a safe way to get injured. Honestly, now looking back 2 years since I started, almost 2 years since I started training for my first marathon, I guess I understand where I was at, but also like the satisfaction of finishing your first marathon and setting yourself those goals. And in a lot of ways, and we'll talk a lot about this, the marathon and running is so unique compared to all other sports because it's so much easier to compare your results with yourself. You can compare your previous races and compare to a lot of other sports where you kind of just have to compare yourself to others. Running it's something special. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast, your podcast for everything running. In this podcast, we'll talk about specifics of training. We're going to talk about science. We're going to have guests on. We're going to talk to other marathon runners. And we're going to hopefully try to inspire you to run faster marathons yourself. Finishing a marathon and just have more fun with running. Whether you are an established runner, you're a new runner, you're a future runner, or you're just obsessed with running, this is the podcast for you. My name is Kristian Warwick. I'm a full-time filmmaker and photographer based in Oslo, Norway. And 2 years ago, I found this great fascination with marathon running. And I did my first marathon in 2:52. And with that, qualified for the Boston Marathon that I'm going to run in a month from now. We're going to talk more about the Boston Marathon in this episode, but first, let me take you through my athletic journey, let you get to know myself or me a bit better, and hopefully that will kind of let you give you a better picture of who I am and why I'm where I am today. So I started my life in a pretty athletic family. My dad is a two-time Olympian, and so pretty early on, I decided that I wanted to be an Olympian as well. And so I started out as a speed skater, and for years I was a full-time speed skater. I represented Norway as an athlete or as a speed skater, and although that was a lot of fun, I never kind of reached those goals that I set for myself. And honestly, that has been a really hard thing to deal with. You can find more about the story of my speed skating and kind of dealing with that dream being broken on my YouTube channel, Warwick Runs. And I was doing this for a lot of years, obviously had a great physical capacity. And when I stopped skating in 2020, I kind of just went cold turkey in terms of training. I did not work out a lot at all. I used to having between 25 and 30 hours of training a week, and at some point I didn't even work out at all during my weeks. So that was quite a transition. Not something that I would recommend for anyone, but I guess that would also kind of explain why when I say that I almost started from the bottom or from scratch in July of 2023 when I started working out or training for my marathon. That kind of explains how that is possible as a former athlete. Besides speed skating or after speed skating, I kind of built my own business doing or making films, taking photos, and today Wild Studio is my main source of income. Doing some YouTube, having some income there too, but mainly my focus is on client work, working with some really cool brands that I'm really proud of, like working with Red Bull, Oakley, BMW, brands that I could only dream of working with when I first started out. But you're not here to listen to me talking about my career as a speed skater. I'm sure that you tuned in on this because you saw that it's called the Marathon Podcast, and you're here to hear more about marathon running. I don't know where you are as a listener right now, like if you're already a runner, if you've done a lot of marathons, if you're preparing for your first ones. I'm sure that there are a lot of different people listening. Regardless of who you are, where you are on your journey, welcome to this podcast. I thought that today we're gonna talk a little bit about my journey to the 252 marathon. We're gonna talk about the Boston Marathon that is coming up in a month, and also obviously what you can expect from this podcast. I think that we should start with the last part. So what is it that you can expect from this podcast going forward? I feel like I have quite a lot of experience and knowledge about endurance sports in general, and I hope that eventually you can learn a lot from this podcast. Maybe I can give you some advice on how to recover faster, how to improve more over a shorter time. And I think that it's also, at least for me, it's nice to have this journey to work towards. So my goal, long-term goal, is to do a 225 marathon, and I hope that together, you as a listener and me here talking about this, we can just share this journey together. And there will obviously be some guests on this podcast. I'm really hoping to have marathon runners, some that have been, some that are just starting out, and together we can kind of share our experiences, ask questions to each other. And I'm not just talking about guests from Norway, I'm talking about international guests, and hopefully we'll get some pretty big names on here eventually. But yeah, that is kind of the whole purpose of this podcast. I just want to be your companion on your runs, during your workouts, and hopefully this podcast can be for you what other podcasts about running have been for me. So that's what you can expect. In terms of my running story or my marathon journey, you can see some of the documentaries that I made on this journey on my YouTube channel, Warwick Runs. If not, or maybe in addition to it, you can listen to this podcast and I'll talk you through it. I'll try to keep it short, but still kind of like paint a picture of how I got to where I am today. So it was June 2023, and my brother-in-law, he was running a marathon. He was preparing for it. He set us a goal to run the Boston Marathon, which you have to qualify for. And with that, we kind of set ourselves a goal of doing a 255 marathon. And so I had no running experience whatsoever. Obviously did some running here and there when I was a speed skater, but other than that, it was not like I had any experience doing long distance runs. So we started working out. I mean, kind of kicked the whole thing off on 1st of July that year. And on October 29th, 2023, I was doing the Narragansett road races in Rhode Island. And that was 4 months of training before this 252 marathon. And I did not really seek any external help. I was just trying to do what my experience was from being an athlete myself. And my experience from when I was a full-time speed skater was that I was always in great shape during the summer and the fall. And when I'm talking about great shape in this way, I'm talking about great like shape to perform over a longer time. And I knew that 3 hours of competition time there are different things you need to focus on than if you were to run a 1500 meter or a mile or like 400 meters, because then it's much more complicated, or even just a 10K. You need to focus so much more on speed. When it comes to the marathon, you need to be able to actually run for that long. That is one thing. And then you need to be able to have a steady pace. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made in terms of like, at least, or the biggest misconceptions that I had of the marathon, was that a marathon would be just as hard as a 10K the whole time. Not sure why I was thinking that, because logic would kind of just tell you otherwise. But I thought that I would be exhausted from the very first kilometer. And then eventually I realized that that's not going to be the case. I need to be able to just keep a steady pace for as long as possible. And so when we started out, obviously we had a target pace, which was, I'm going to use kilometers for this because I'm not that good with miles, but we had a goal that would be 409 pace, because that would equal a 2:55 marathon. And in the beginning, when I was starting out, I was struggling to do this like 1K at a time. So I was not really able to keep that pace that we set as the target pace when I started out. And then the other challenge was to obviously build up the mileage, just to get more kilometers and every week, because you also have to be careful with this. So if you're new to running and you decided to run a marathon, just make sure that you kind of build this up pretty slowly. I have experienced myself how bad things can get if you're increasing too much too fast. And so for me, it was like kind of building myself up to first having 30 kilometers a week, which is obviously nothing, and then up to having 50 kilometers a week, where I was like, okay, now we're talking, and then up to 60, and then my highest mileage during that fall was 90 kilometers, and I think I had like 3 weeks of 80 to 90 kilometers, but that was still the highest mileage that I had. And I think that is kind of good for you to hear if you're a new runner. I did a 2:52 marathon. Highest mileage was 90 kilometers a week. So my weeks, I'm not going to go through every week here. We might do that in a different podcast episode, but like I was building myself up slowly, and then after a month, I was sure that I had a stress-induced fracture. I tried to be pretty smart about my training before that, like trying to do like maximum one threshold training a week, because I really do think that when you don't have more kilometers a week than like 50, 60, 70, then if you start having more than one hard training a week or semi-hard training, then chances of getting injured or just too tired, it's just not worth the risk. And so for me, I was mainly focusing on having those low intensity runs, and with only having one threshold training a week, I also allowed myself to have a little bit of a higher intensity on the low intensity trainings, or like the easier runs. And we're not talking high intensity, it's just that I allowed myself to be at 145. Like I had like a maximum, the roof of 145 the heart rate during the easy runs. And for reference, my maximum heart rate is around 190. So that is like, I guess it's different how you kind of determine or you define those intensity zones. But for me, that is like just at the bottom of in the zone 2. And I think that kind of, I felt very safe doing it this way, because I knew I didn't have a lot of hard trainings during the week. And so I kept this up. And then, like I said, I thought I had a stress-induced fracture in August that year, so a month in. Turned out I only had too small of shoes. I actually went up like two sizes, almost two sizes in the EU. So coming from speed skating, where all our speed skating boots were super tight, I kind of learned that with running, you need to have more. Your toes need to almost swim in those shoes. So that was a hard learning experience, but I'm happy I learned it so early on. And then I just kept on running, like I said, building myself up, increasing the mileage 1 week at a time, and then still having. I think I averaged one threshold training a week. Not even sure if I had one a week, but uh, I did, when I got to August, start having a couple of competitions. I did two 10Ks, one in August, one in September, and then I did 30K in training at marathon pace. I kind of like really just needed to prove to myself that I was able to keep the pace that I was aiming at. And it did come as a shock to me that I was able to do 409. I think I did 411 for 30 kilometers. And that was kind of a shock to me to see that I was at that level in September already. So like 2 months in to my training, I was able to do that. And then I decided, like 5 weeks prior to the marathon, I decided to do a marathon in training, which is definitely not something I recommend doing. It's running a marathon in the first place is really hard. And if you were to do a marathon, don't do it at marathon pace, like go a bit slower. But I did. I just really needed to have the confidence going into the actual marathon. And so I did, and I had the same average pace as on the 30 kilometers. So I had 4:11, and I did 2:56 marathon. So my first ever marathon, although it was unofficial, was still a sub-3 marathon, and I was obviously stoked. And I had 5 weeks left, and I was like, well, this is gonna be great. I really, really think that that I'm able to do this in an official marathon too. But then there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and one of them being like stomach problems. Like that is something that I think all runners will struggle with from time to time, and it's not really predictable. But the only way you can work around this is to work on fueling during your runs, like getting enough water getting enough nutrition. So during that marathon run, I was able to keep this. Yeah, I didn't have any problems with the stomach at all, and I found a great way of fueling. And so I'm using Fuel of Norway, which is a Norwegian brand, and it's easy on the stomach. It's easy to digest, and yeah, I like the flavors a lot. So that is a brand that I am really happy to use, and I had a small partnership with them, but I was really happy to work with them when I was able to bring my own nutrition on the actual marathon. The nutrition part is obviously something we're going to talk more about too. I'm gonna hit it, like we're gonna touch in on this a little bit more when we're talking about the Boston Marathon, just because there's it will vary a little bit from marathon to marathon, and I think that you should adjust a little bit. But yeah, for me, Fuel of Norway has been a great kind of help in my marathon training, especially since I know that my stomach is a bit sensitive when it comes to running. Anyways, I think that I was building myself up pretty well, was in great shape before, like 5 weeks before, obviously doing a 256 in training. And then it's important to emphasize that I was having a full-time job on the side here. Like the week after I did the marathon, I had to go, I traveled down to Tenerife, some islands outside of Spain, to work for a week. And it was pretty hard to combine, but also pretty good timing since I only just done a marathon in training, and I didn't really want to push myself a lot after that. So it was nice to easy weekend. But yeah, honestly, I had 2 to 3, maybe sometimes even 4 rest days a week. I really believe in the rest days and the recovery. Uh, but it's also important for me to emphasize here that I used to be an athlete. Muscle memory has been super helpful. And for those of you who don't know what muscle memory is, it's like our muscles, our body, it remembers where it has been. And so for my body who's had, or me having had a pretty high VO2 max of 76, and also having been pretty strong, pretty, uh, yeah, a good physical capacity, it's been super, like, it's helped me so much. And so from one week to the other, it's been a lot of much more improvement than you could or can expect if you're just starting out. Um, but yeah, I was I kept it up after this trip to Tenerife, and I still had some pretty high mileage weeks. I think they were around like 80 kilometers still. And then approaching the marathon, I did a typical marathon week of still running, but ending up at about 80 kilometers that week, I think, with the marathon, and having some. The marathon was on a Sunday, and I'm pretty sure it was on the Wednesday that I had my last threshold training. And just, yeah. I mean, at that point, you feel like you're flying no matter what. I was actually feeling really bad, like crap, the week of the marathon, but I still, like, when I was running, I did feel like I was flying. I mean, you have a lot of adrenaline going into a marathon week, and all of that. And yeah, so the marathon itself, I think this is crucial. And I think, like, if you're gonna take one thing away from this, obviously the training, you have to find your way. Uh, but in terms of the marathon, I don't think there are a lot of ways to do this. You still have to start at a comfortable pace. If you're running with a heart rate monitor like I did, you might know what your heart rate should be at. Like, you know where your threshold is, where what you can't. Yeah, you know the intensity you can be at for that long. At least I did, and I could really feel at the times when I just went a little bit too hard. And this is like just one heartbeat more or two heartbeats more than what I know that my body is comfortable with. And I could feel like, okay, I can't keep this up, so I need to slow down a little bit. But I think that the rule, or the thing that you need to really focus on and remember when it comes to the marathon, is that it's not supposed to be painful in the beginning. Like, you start out and you're gonna do this for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, unless you're a pro and you're doing it like 2 hours. But it's important to emphasize that I'm not talking about the pros right now. I'm sure they are having much more pain from the get-go, but you still have to be at a pace and an intensity that is comfortable for you, not a pace where you're actually struggling from the very first kilometer. And so for the first 2 hours, it was pretty comfortable. You're obviously working, but it's like you can still talk a little bit, like when you're passing people. And so like for me, having my fiance's family with me there, they were helping me to fuel and giving me water and gels whenever I needed. I was really surprised by how easy it all felt. And I kept just reminding myself, telling myself every kilometer, or all the time, that, okay, you're not even halfway, like the race hasn't even started yet. And so it's tempting sometimes, I think, when you are halfway through the marathon, you're feeling good, and then it's like, okay, I'm halfway there, but it's still quite a lot of time left. So I I did the first half marathon in 1:24, and I was looking at 2:48. And I luckily was not like, okay, I'm gonna start running faster. Like, now I'm feeling fresh and good, and it's been all good until this point. So I'm just gonna keep on going. But I did make a huge mistake of fueling mid uphill. It was like a kilometer long hill, and I decided to fuel there. Stupid mistake. Lost a lot of momentum and had to suffer from, like, had to deal with that for a little while. But the point is just like the marathon really doesn't start until you've passed 35 kilometers, honestly, or maybe 30 kilometers, but like between 30 and 35, you can feel super good, and all of a sudden you hit that famous wall, and it's just not gonna work that well for you. And so like for me, I felt like the last 10 kilometers, that was a fight. Like that was just me pushing myself. But still, like finishing 2:52, second in that marathon, that was a huge moment. And I think that if we go back to the introduction of this podcast of like, why are you doing a marathon? Are you crazy? I would still say yes, it's a little bit crazy, but that feeling of crossing that finish line and just feeling like, wow, I finished my first official marathon and I did it in the 2:52. Like I regardless of your time in terms of whether it's 2:52, 3:52, 6:52, it's just that like reaching your goal and proving to yourself that I did something that I said I would do. Because obviously and I'm pretty vocal about my goals, when people are telling you that, when you're telling people about your goals, especially here in Norway, a lot of people will enjoy trying to tell you that you can't. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna prove to the haters, they're not necessarily haters, but prove to the doubters that I can do this, and then it feels even better doing that. And so 2:52:04 I think, and just so happy, stoked, ready to do another marathon, or like train for a new one. Obviously got injured. We're gonna talk more about that in a different episode, but this was October 23, and I would have to wait for another year to see if I actually qualified for the Boston Marathon because of a qualification window. So let's jump into the Boston Marathon. I think that already in the next episode, we're going to talk about everything Boston Marathon in terms of qualification, and what the Boston Marathon is actually like, what's the hype. But we're like, obviously there is there's this window of qualifying. So you have to run your qualification marathon between September 15th and September 15th, I think. So then mine being in October, then obviously it was within the window. But the problem, or like not the problem, but the thing is that even though I did this in 2023, it's not until 25 that I can actually run it. So a month from today, I'm doing the Boston Marathon, and I thought that I was pretty within, like that I was pretty safe, because you have the 3-hour qualification time, so you have to do a sub 3 if you're in my age group. But then you have the cutoff time, which all depends on how many runners have been fast, how many people applied. So like doing a sub 3 marathon gives you the chance to actually apply, and then you have the cutoff time. And this year it was actually almost 7 minutes. So that means that I was only 1 minute within the cutoff time. So you have to do like 2:53:11 or something to actually run the 2025 marathon if you're my age group, and I'm 32. So it was crazy, but I was so stoked when I learned that I qualified for it.
Boston, I'm in. I forgot to film my first reaction, but I made it. My dad is here. Christine is here. 6:51 is the cutoff time, and I made it. I can't believe it. I've been so nervous the last couple of days because I knew that there was a record high registration, and the big internet has been telling me that it might not work.
Super excited about running it, and it's been a bumpy ride. We're going to talk more about that too. Just keep listening to this podcast because there's going to be more episodes. But yeah, a month from now, Boston Marathon, and that is honestly, I think that as a marathon runner, one of the coolest marathons you can run. It's so hard to qualify, so popular, and it's just gotten this legendary status within the world of marathon running. And apparently, you're like almost a superstar walking around in that Boston jacket on marathon weekend. So I can't wait for that. My dad is coming with me, my brother and his girlfriend, my fiance and her family, who are all based in Boston. They will be there, and it's only 1 month away. And then it's like, obviously, what do you do the last month of uh, preparing for the marathon, and especially for the Boston because it's a bit different. I honestly thought that I would be in a very different place at this point. I thought that I would be in the best shape of my life a year and a half after my last marathon. But because of that injury that kept me from running for more than a year, honestly, it has not been the best. And now I have 10 days of being sick, as you might be able to hear. But for me right now, it's all about getting some pretty solid last 4 weeks of running in, and hopefully I'll be able to get up to that mileage that I was talking about, like 80 to 90 kilometers. I was almost at 80 before I got sick, so like I'm almost there. And then I need to get a longer run in, definitely not at marathon pace, but more like a bit behind, just, or like a bit slower, just to get more of that long run with a higher intensity kind of training in. And then it's all about trusting yourself, and at least for me, trusting my capacity. But the difference with Boston, like compared to a lot of other marathons, and I have never actually done the Boston Marathon myself, so I don't have the experience of this, but it's easy to believe the people who have done it, in terms of the profile of the race, you are going so much more downhill, and also a lot more uphill than in most marathons. So you need more strength training. You need to kind of learn and get used to running more downhill and uphill. And I've been trying to do some of that on the treadmill. I'll try to do some more of that the last 4 weeks before here, but it's not been enough. Definitely not. And another issue is obviously living in Norway, where it's very much winter in the winter months. Then I've had to do most of my training on the treadmill. So it's very different than other marathons, but we're going to talk more about the Boston Marathon, preparing for it, qualifying for it, and obviously when I'm done with the Boston Marathon, we're going to talk about the Boston Marathon and the experience. Because one thing is the running part. I'm now kind of just stoked about being there, feeling the Boston crowd. It's going to be amazing. I think it's going to be sick. And then I did mention that the nutrition and fueling might be different from marathon to marathon. And what I meant by that is that during the Boston or different marathons, you might not have access to the nutrition that you're used to. And if you are able to train yourself on handling that nutrition, I think that is definitely a benefit. For me, I would prefer if I could use Fuel of Norway for the whole thing, but it's gonna be so crowded. I don't have anyone who can provide me with gels during the run, so then I'm just gonna kind of trained myself to learn, or my body to learn, how to work with Martin, which is the official sponsor of Boston, and then I can have some of them with me, and but that will also be provided with them by Boston Marathon during the race. So I think that is also something that is important for people to kind of just think about when you're training for a marathon. What is the easiest way for you to get those things? During the first one, that I was able to get a lot of nutrition handed to me, and then I was able to just use whatever I'm used to. But that is too big of a risk in this one, because I don't know if I will ever be able to see them. There's going to be a lot of people running and a lot of people watching. So yeah, that is definitely something to consider. So that's a bit of my story. Now you got to know a bit more of my running career, how it has been, what I've done to get here. And as you can tell, I'm pretty enthusiastic about this running thing, and I'm also super excited about sharing this with you guys. And we'll see, or hopefully you guys will like this. I am just excited to share my thoughts on this, but I'm obviously more excited about having people on here and hearing their marathon stories. So really pumped to have done this first episode, and please reach out if you have any questions, if there are things you want me to talk about. But this is, like I said, not going to be a one-man show the whole time. Obviously, there will be episodes of that too, but we're going to have people on here, and can't wait for that. So thanks for listening. See you in the next one.